Hi, I'm back. There we go again. It must be Sunday. And you know what? One of my friends called me the other day and she said, you got to have a song. I don't know yet what that's going to be, but I'm working on it, and I will think of something that is appropriate and that I can actually sing, like maybe 2 sentences, and then I'm going to say, and that's all I know. But so far, yes, that you had a good suggestion there, but I haven't figured out a song yet. However, just in case you're wondering where I am, well, since Tucson is now at the top of the list of the coronavirus, I packed up my little satchel and I'm actually in Austria in the mountains, right next to a little mountain hut, which of course is a complete lie because those who know me well know I like to kid, and this is actually my dog house in my backyard, which will soon be given to 2 cats because I need somebody that can eat the pack rats. So now those of you who thought you might want to visit, you might want to just reevaluate that one. Because yes, indeedy, I am in the desert, and yes, indeedy, you have all sorts of fun animals, among them scorpions. And Missy Pooh here, who has always said, do not go barefoot, do not go barefoot. The other day, I did not listen to my own advice, and I got stung by one, and I can tell you, this is an experience I don't need to do again. And if I would have had either Demerol or morphine, I think it would have been easy to sail through that, but I didn't. So I was in excruciating pain, and at one point when I was sitting in my little armchair, Krishna, my dog, came over and he sat down next to me. He put his head on the side of the chair, and then he stood up and he put both of his paws on the side of the chair. And I put my arm around him like this, and I couldn't believe it. Of course, I'm interpreting this as pure love. The reality is that tears are salty, and he likes salty stuff. But we're not going to go there. We're going to say that he loves me so much that he was washing my cheek because he knew Mommy was hurting. So let me believe that. It might be kahooey, but I want to believe that. I like that better than, oh, well, it was just a salt in your tears. Anyway, so today's story, you will see a total shift in what's been going on. And this is called Papa and the Wheelchair. That was really a wheelbarrow. So let me tell you about this. So things were going along not very well. My father was having a very, very hard time after the war. He had been wounded twice. Once he got shot through here, once through his arm, and I used to rub his shoulder, and then sometimes little pieces of metal would fall out. And he was physically, he had pain, but what was more important with him was the emotional turmoil. And back in those days, they didn't have any association or doctors that would deal with these poor men that had seen things in the war that nobody should ever see. But here we are. That's life. And he used to say to me that, yes, it doesn't look like I got hurt, but I did get hurt, except it's in me. It's in my heart. It's in my soul. So I feel crippled. And the way that he started to deal with it is that he drank more and more. To make it worse and exacerbate this tendency, his mother was an alcoholic, the grandma that I loved so much. She would come home every night, I don't know, 2, 3 in the morning, and I think, oh, grandma's coming home. My mother would go, oh, I told her to not do that. I can't believe she does that. And then a lot of times the next day my mom would fight with my dad about his mother, the floozy, the alcoholic, it was sad, and I didn't like that. I wanted everybody to love everybody. They all loved me, So I couldn't understand why they couldn't just be really nice to each other. My mother hated my French grandmother. She didn't just dislike her, she hated her. And one of the reasons was that my grandmother never did a thing. She, every afternoon, she'd finally get up between 4 and 5, she'd get dressed, she would hug and kiss me and tell me how I was the best little girl in the whole wide world. Sometimes you could hear my mother go, well, yeah, of course she's the best little girl in the whole wide world, because she cleans here, she cooks, she does the washing, and what do? And Grandma would just say, oh, mon Dieu. So there was no love lost between those two. And the older I got, the worse this got for me, because I just kept thinking, no, I want you to like each other. Well, of course, that was not on the horizon. It only got worse as things went on. And my father got more depressed. And at that point, my dad was drunk every day. By late afternoon, he'd be drunk. And the worst part was on Sundays, because my mother worked 6 days a week. So Sundays was supposed to be this nice lunch. And frequently my dad would disappear. He would go into our tool shed, and I think, oh my God, he's trying to figure out whether he can find any money. Because I would have a little bit of money that I would either get from Clara, she'd give me a little bit, or all these boyfriends that my grandma had, they would frequently, she would take me when she would go, and they would let me play the slot machines in these little restaurants, and I was lucky. I always won money. And then I would hide it, because I knew that if my dad found it, he would take it. So at one point I made a deal with him, and I said, okay, Papa, when you want money to buy liquor, I will loan it to you, but you have to give me 30% interest. And he went, how much? I'm your father. I said, I know that, but you're not supposed to buy liquor. But you do it anyway. So, yeah, I always have money. I hide it. And he said, oh my God, I can't believe my own child has given me money. I have to pay interest. I said, well, that's it. Because I'm saving my money because I'm going to go to Paris sometime. So he said, oh, okay, fine, then we'll make this deal. But it was, I no longer looked forward to Sundays. I used to, because then everybody was there, and sometimes we'd bake a cake, and it was really fun. But now they would always fight. And sometimes my dad would get up early on a Sunday morning, and he'd be gone by 10 o'clock. And then by the time when we were supposed to eat, which was about 1, he was nowhere to be found. And then my mother would send me over to Nana's place. If any of you had read, Nana had a Nini, that was our neighbor that had converted one of her rooms into sort of a little bar. And, you know, all these guys that were like my dad's age, they would get together and they'd drink 1 or 2 or 3 or more. And they would play cards. And so frequently my mother would send me over there, and yeah, my dad was there, and sometimes he could still walk back home, but sometimes he couldn't, and then Nana would say, look, you know, you can just stay here till you feel better. But so the atmosphere on Sundays, it was tough. My mother worked very much. She would leave the house by 5 o'clock. She'd come home at 8, 9, 10 at night, 6 days a week, and almost at that point, maybe every other Sunday they fought. And it was violent. It wasn't just verbal abuse to each other. They would throw things. And that really was not a good idea, because we didn't have much to begin with. But at one point, my dad would make fun of it. And he'd say, oh yeah, at our house, you wouldn't believe what we have. We have flying chickens. So once in a while, when they were actually able to get a chicken, this was always a big production, because my mom would come home with the chicken. It had its feathers. And then she'd sit outside in the yard and she'd pull out all the feathers. And the next part is, oh, that I really disliked that, because she had to singe the rest off, and that smell, oh, I just thought it was horrible. Of course, I didn't eat chicken, but still, I saw this plucking of the feathers and then that singeing thing. So once in a while, when they would end up with this humongous fight, my mother couldn't stand it. She was the thrower, and she would just get up from the dining room table, and take the chicken, and it would just go, throw through the room, and it would land on the wall, and there were pieces of from the plate all over the floor, mixed in with the chicken, and then of course it was my job to clean it back up. And I really started to get very sad. This is just not what I wanted. And somehow I thought it was my fault, because my mother would always say, well, yeah, your daughter. And then he would say, yeah, your daughter. And somehow in my mind, I thought, if I wouldn't have been born, they'd be happy, because they were very happy before the war when I wasn't there. So it must be me. And I started to get very withdrawn. I still had my job working for Tante Clara and, of course, my fox. And by that time, I also had a cat, and I'll tell you a story about that someday. But it was getting very tough for me to live there, and I didn't know. I just didn't know what to do. So one day on a Sunday, a neighbor was at our gate, and she was going, Frau Freimann, Frau Freimann. Mrs. Freeman. And my mother came out, and she went to the gate, and I went with her. I was working in the garden. And she said, well, look, you're going to have to do something about your husband, because he's sleeping it off. If you walk down Greteweg and you turn to your right, you'll see his bicycle. It's leaning against the hedge, and he's sleeping along the road there. You need to pick him up. Oh, God, my mother, she was just shaking her head, and she just went, oh, my God, this is terrible. Now the neighbors know. And this is just, okay, come on, you got to help me. And I said, okay, what are we doing? She said, well, we got to bring him home. So get our wheelbarrow, and we'll go get Papa. So there we went, and I thought, oh, please don't let anybody see me. This is my dad. How horrible. So, excuse me for a moment. I have to have a drink. Thank you. So, yeah, we found him. And sure enough, he was fast asleep by one of the hedges. His bicycle was a little bit further down. And then my mother said, okay, help me put him in the wheelbarrow. Well, that was interesting. It was almost impossible. And somebody came by on a bicycle and said, oh, Mrs. Freeman, yeah, your husband, well, yeah, we all know he drinks one too many, but are you trying to get him home? And my mother said yes, and I kept thinking, could I be like Rumpelstiltskin? If I tried to go through the floor, would it just eat me up, and I could never come back, and nobody will know this is my family? Well, that's what I thought. But of course it didn't happen. So he said, look, let me help you. Let me put him in the wheelbarrow. And so that's what we did. So here we went. My mom and Papa in the wheelbarrow. And his little girl and his bicycle going back home. I was just absolutely beyond sad. I just thought, no. This is all wrong. So I don't like this. But I just went out with my fox, and I was hugging my fox, because that's the only thing that I knew how to do. So, excuse me, the next day, after he came home from work, I don't know why my mother was there, because normally she did not get back from work until it was dark, but she was there, and they got into a really major big fight. And by that time, my dad had added a hallway. So our original front door, which went into the kitchen, you walked through the hallway, and then here was the front door, and it was mainly glass. And somehow, my dad and I were in the kitchen, and he locked the door, and my mother was in the hallway. And she kept saying, open the door. And they were yelling and screaming at each other. And he said, no, I'm not going to open the door because you're behaving like a crazy person. And she said, crazy? You want to see crazy? Well, let me show you crazy. And my grandmother's going, mon Dieu, what are you going to do? My mother walked out to the tool shed. She came back with an axe. And she said, if you don't open this door right now, I'm going to knock it down. And my father said, okay. If that's what you think you need to do, if you need to be that violent, your little girl now is going to see a side of you that she didn't know. So go ahead. You know, that's fine. Do it. That's what she did. She knocked down that glass. There were pieces of glass all over that tiny little kitchen. Absolutely everywhere. There was glass in the hallway. And then she opened the door and she said, don't you ever do this again. I will hit you. And he said, okay, why don't you just go ahead? You got the axe in your hand. And I was terrified. I thought, oh my God, what is happening? When are they going to stop? And my mother said, no, I just want you to know I'm not putting up with this crap anymore. You're drunk all the time. And I'm going to take my little girl and I'm going to emigrate to the United States. I'm going to call my call. I'm going to get in touch with my sister, and somehow maybe from work I can actually call her, but if not, I don't care. I'm going to write a letter. I want her to sponsor me, and I'm getting a divorce, and I'm going to go to America. And my dad said, well, good luck. Because once they find out what you just did in front of your daughter with an axe, you know what? They're not going to let you have your little girl. Besides, I don't want you to have her, because then she's going to end up like you. I was devastated. I could not believe what they were doing. And I just thought, oh my God, those are my parents. This is really, really sad. So my grandmother came in after she thought it was safe, and she just grabbed me and she said, come on, you're going to come with me. From there on, of course, life was very different because they did fight all the time. And there were some other things that happened to me also, which, you know, if you will continue to watch, you'll see what the other stuff was that I couldn't really reconcile. But that resulted in my running away from home when I was 15 and I went to England. So not only did I have my own room then, there was nobody fighting, and I had a shower, wow, and an indoor toilet. So all the way around. I had food, and it was, you know, a very different life. But that is my story for today, Papa and the Wheelbarrow. Thank you, and I love you.